Yeah, I came away really optimistic, actually, and full with hope. Partly because that's what I heard from people when there was a lot of frustration I'd hear from both Democrats and Republicans about how divided we were. But in the end, most people expressed hope that we would get through it. They weren't always able to articulate exactly why, but there was this sense that we would get through it because that's what we do. And actually, there's a lot of history in the book, but that's probably the most historically accurate assessment that you could make, because we've been through so much as a country, even though we're relatively young, so much violence and division, Civil War being the worst of it, but plenty of other episodes too. But we've found ways to get through it, and part of the story of the book is highlighting those ways, the kind of the values that have led us out of the dark times. And I think the more we can recognize that we've been through versions of what we're experiencing today, the more kind of hope and faith we will have that we can get through it.
Are there any prescriptions? I mean, hopefully we don't have to get to a civil war before we can reset, right? How should we deal with this division?
Well, there's a lot, I think, that we can learn from Lincoln, and that's why he's the perfect guide for the trip. And so one thing to keep in mind is, Lincoln in the 1850s, as the country was heading towards civil war, said of white Southerners, they are just as we would be if we were in their situation. Now, Lincoln abhorred slavery, thought of it as a moral abomination. But here he was speaking about Southerners and their support for slavery with no judgment. And I think that is something that we can learn from, because today there's so much judgment about the other side, and so much kind of quickness to decide that the other side is not just wrong, but they're evil. And I think the more that we can recognize that we're shaped by our circumstances, and that that different points of view can still hold valid perspectives, to not assume that we are entirely correct, that others have valid viewpoints, the more that we can try to hold the whole thing together.
Frank, do you think it's just Donald Trump, so that if he is no longer a part of the GOP or guiding or leading the GOP, do things change? I mean, you saw people as you drove, and it was off the beaten path, right? Sometimes it was dirt roads. And one of the things that we often talk about is the struggles that a lot of Americans feel, that, yep, we've got a stock market that sometimes is hitting records, or we've seen it, and yet that's not Main Street. And so I wonder if it's something deeper in the fabric right now.
Yeah, it's definitely deeper. This doesn't all go away. The division doesn't all go away if Trump goes away. I definitely believe it runs much deeper than that, and that's why we've got to be able to recognize what can get us through it, because it's not defeating Donald Trump. It's not waiting for him to leave the political scene. The forces that are dividing the country right now, and you see it anytime you pick up social media, you see it on your phone, but you hear it in conversations, and you sense it in people's anxiety. All of that is going to be with us, and it really requires leaders to tap into, as I say in the book, the better angels of our nature. It's a Lincoln phrase, but it does require leadership that reminds us of the best of America and the best of our values, and to recognize when leaders are trying to exploit the worst in us and to tap into our fears and hatred.